this meeting on time. So we will begin with a prayer. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, we won't be remaining in PowerPoint land for very long, but I do just be able to walk you through what we hope to accomplish at the hearing this morning, which is scheduled to run for 90 minutes, although I would be surprised if we go quite that long. But first, some housekeeping items, some important things for you to know as you are coming into convention. And then we will go over the 2 resolutions that we have received, the 3 amendments to the canons, the 2023 proposed budget, and then a report on the direction that the diocese is going in youth ministry. And then just a word about kind of the purpose of this is essentially to try to make the conversation about all of this legislation on the convention floor go more smoothly, so that we can raise up issues that may appear in these canon amendments and resolutions and the budget, and be prepared well in advance with any amendments that may need to be made to them on the convention floor, rather than trying to encounter them unexpectedly as the resolutions hit the floor and try to craft amendments in real time. Of course, it is in order to craft amendments in real time if we need to do that, but we're trying to minimize the need to do so. So first, on housekeeping, as we've been preparing for this convention, one of the unusual challenges that we've had is trying to remember how to do things when we don't have to make modifications for COVID. This convention will be entirely in person. We will be, and so we will be returning essentially to what the normal rules of order were. So we're not going to have modifications for hybrid format or online formats as well. Those rules will be posted on the website a little bit later this week, but if you want to see what they're going to look like, go to the website and look for the 2019 convention. There will probably be some slight modifications to those rules, but that was our last in-person only convention, and the rules we'll be operating under will be very similar to that. The one thing that we are retaining from the 2020 and 2021 conventions is that we will be continuing with electronic voting. We adopted it because of the exigencies of the pandemic, but it does happen to be much more efficient for counting votes as well. So we'll be doing voice votes or raising hands for some things, but for our balloting for elected office, for instance, we will be using electronic voting through a system called Election Buddy. All of the convention delegates will be receiving an email later this week with a code that you will use to log into the Election Buddy system to enable you to vote. And so please bring a device that is capable of connecting to Wi-Fi. If you or a member of your delegation does not have a device that connects to Wi-Fi, there are ways around that, and we'll help you with that when we get to convention. Finally, nominations for elected office are now closed in terms of being able to get your information out to the convention in advance. However, nominations from the floor are in order. And if there are any elected offices that you wish to be nominated for, please get your information to us by 8:30 a.m. on Saturday, November 5th, earlier if possible. You can submit that either directly to Kim Christopher at christopher@indiedio.org, or you can use the nominations form that is on the website. You'll get a message when you use that form saying nominations are closed, but it'll further say if you wish to be nominated from the floor, go ahead and use this form to get your information to us. So we simply ask that you upload that information so that we can share who you are with the rest of the convention that will be electing. So with that, I'm going to stop the screen sharing. And let's go ahead and proceed to the resolutions. So the first resolution is resolution, just a sec, getting there. Just uploading the link to the resolutions so that if you don't have it, you can get to it quickly. So the first resolution is resolution number 1, compensation for deacons. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to that resolution before we offer an explanation before we open it up for questions, comments, potential amendments? I don't see anybody offering to speak to it, so I'll just open us up for conversation. Feel free to, we're a small enough group that you can feel free to unmute yourself if you like. If you're having a hard time getting somebody's attention, you can use the raise hand feature. I am not seeing any. Oh,
Brendan,
yes.
where does it appear in the budget?
This does not impact the diocesan budget. So this would require that congregations would be responsible for compensation of deacons.
But it does increase insurance costs for the diocese, right?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, to even be eligible for health insurance, for self-paid insurance, let alone the diocese taking on insurance coverage, you have to be at least half-time, and that's Episcopal Church unless you're half-time, and none of our deacons are at that level. The one thing I'll just note about this resolution is that similar resolutions are appearing in conventions around the church. In at least one diocese in California, the resolution was tabled for concern about violation of minimum wage laws in the state of California. We have had our chancellors review this resolution to see if it runs any risk of violating Indiana minimum wage laws, and it does not. All right, seeing no further discussion, then we'll move on to resolution number 2 in the same document, the covenant to root out racism in the Diocese of Indianapolis. Do I have anybody prepared to speak to this resolution today? All right, Shauna, thank you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So I am speaking to this as the current co-chair of the Diocesan Racial Justice and Education team. Some fellow members are here on the call with me, and that includes Valeria Phillips, Marianne Scott, Deacon Kathy Scott, and we have 2 other members, Natalie Palmer and Reverend Bradley Pace. We submitted this resolution as the next step in what has been an evolving conversation within the diocese, beginning with the call of Bishop Jennifer as our bishop, which preceded my time here, but then progressing to the articulation of diocesan pillars of mission, one of which includes transforming systems of injustice that affect those who are marginalized and standing with them. As that work has progressed over the years, we saw a need for a next intentional and ongoing conversation within our parishes. We have had beginnings of things in the work of anti-racism that have been immensely successful. The Sacred Ground program has really sort of sparked this new learning within our laity and clergy, and some surprise and some questions about what can we do next? How do we begin to take action on the things that we have learned? And so this covenant that has been adopted by the House of Bishops And I believe Bishop Jennifer helped Bishop Dion Johnson to craft it. Outlines some particular actions that can be taken by individuals or by organizations. And so we have structured this with the idea that this would be the model that our diocese would adopt, and then working with each of the levels of how that works within the diocese. So starting with executive council within our parishes and empowering laity and clergy to be doing this work in the community with particular actions rather than an amorphous, now go do something. So we are not anticipating that this covenant would be adopted where every congregation would sign on and say, we are committing to all of these things. There is quite a lot in there. What we are asking is that each congregation would vote whether to adopt it or not. And if adopted, to choose 3 things, which you may already be doing. So you get credit for work already done. But to take those 3 things and make an intentional commitment to living into those more fully over the next couple of years, as the diocese would work in conjunction with that to do that on a diocesan scale. I think that's all I'd like to say at this point, but other members may jump in if they have something to add.
So, Sean, I see your hand. I'm going to wait for just a second. And Shauna, I'm posting in the chat a link to the pre-filed amendment to the resolution, as well as the additional co-sponsors, if you'd like to address what that's about.
Yes. So this is a pre-filed amendment because we have been having some conversations after submitting the initial resolution with clergy and laity across the diocese to find out if they wanted to sign on as co-sponsors. And so we have submitted a list of the people who have said that they would like to do so. We also moved 1 paragraph so that it is in better chronological order and have made a couple of grammatical corrections. So that is the resolution link that you'll see that Brendan just put up.
Great, thank you. And as a reminder to participants here, the pre-filed amendment will still have to be introduced on the convention floor before it has sort of official status, but it's provided here so that you all can know what's coming and have it in mind. Sean Sullivan. Sean, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, one thing I was noticing in both versions, the last paragraph, I'm a little, well, I don't know what the word is, but I'm wondering about the language, because can we pre-commit to future conventions what they have to do? I mean, can we, like this way, can we say the 186th and 187th conventions are committed to this before they even in fact meet?
So I believe what we can do is say that as the convention gathering this year, we are charging the executive council with this plan, which would that is the body that is responsible for ensuring that the will and action of the convention is carried out in the interim. So if this convention decides this is the work that we want to do, we are asking that the reports be towards progress of whatever plan would be developed would be reported on at the next 2 years conventions.
Patrick.
And I would just add to that, that last paragraph talks about the reporting. So it would be no different than the reports that convention requests from budget, youth ministry, Waycross. It would be similar in that vein was our intention.
Sean, I do see the point you're raising, and I'll inquire with the chancellor about whether there are some technical issues with the language that need to be addressed. But in terms of the intention here, I don't see a problem.
And I agree with the intention. I'm just thinking that, especially since you have a pre-file that's going to come up for consideration, that you might want to consider adjusting that language to be a little more in terms of what you'd like to see rather than the commitment that I don't think we can make.
I'll forward that question to the Chancellor. I suspect we might need a slight change in phrasing. Anything else on this resolution? All right, then we will move on to the proposed changes to the canons. And I'm going to post a link to that in the chat. All right, so we have three, and I will speak to the first two amendments, and since I wrote them, and then the third we'll see where we go. So the first amendment, a proposed amendment, has to do with Canon 6, which is the canon that governs how cooperating ministries are governed. So cooperating ministries are independent 501c3 organizations that choose to affiliate with the Episcopal Diocese of Indianapolis for various reasons, but most commonly for the purpose of securing employee benefits through the church pension group. So we have a number of these today, including Dayspring Center, Trinity Haven, Crane House, St. Richard's School, Julian Center, Exodus, the Avenue Foundation, and I feel like I'm forgetting one and neglecting it. To mention it is not a reflection of its importance. The issue that we've encountered in the past couple of years with admitting new cooperating ministries is that as the canon is written today, a proposed new cooperating ministry has only one opportunity per year to be admitted, and that's when convention meets, typically in November. So there's a very specific timeline that they must hit in order to be able to secure the ability to offer employees quality medical and dental insurance, retirement, and so forth. That timeline does not necessarily fit what is needed for a nascent nonprofit, where their timelines might be moving very differently. Their hiring schedules may be quite different. And what that's led to, in at least one instance in recent years, is an organization submitting an application to become a cooperating ministry before it was really ready to, because it wasn't all the way there in terms of having all of the administrative pieces together. And so it created some problems for the ministry. It created problems for executive council in terms of trying to figure out how we're going to get this together in time for this organization be able to be admitted as a cooperating ministry so that they can hire people 6 months from now. It was that kind of issue. So what this resolution or what this amendment does is it gives more flexibility in the timing of the process. And so it changes the authorization for admitting a cooperating ministry to allow the initial admitting to occur under the authority of the Executive Council rather than the Diocesan Convention. But the Diocesan Convention weighs in at the first opportunity for renewal to determine whether the cooperating ministry is eligible to continue as a cooperating ministry. And that would be a maximum of 2 years later. So that is that's what this does. This is the challenge that is being addressed. And I will pause there and see if there's any conversation about it.
I just want to say this is consistent with almost everything Executive Council does, because it's basically continuing the work at convention between conventions. This may flip the order just a little bit, but it's essentially in that same vein. So it's perfectly consistent with what we try to do as a diocese.
Thanks, Sean. All right, I don't see anybody else right now. So then we'll move on to the next amendment, which is a proposed amendment to Canon 10, Section 3. This is the canon that created the neighborhood governance and ministry collaboration structure. And this addresses an omission in that canon, which is that there is no provision whatsoever to fill a vacancy in the neighborhood convener role. So this addresses that deficiency. And it allows the bishop to appoint a convener should the office become vacant. This is a little bit different from most offices where a vacancy occurs, where it is typically left to the body itself to fill the vacancy. So if that happens on a standing committee, for instance, standing committee appoints somebody to fill the role until the next convention. In the case of the neighborhood convener role, however, considering that the neighborhoods only meet twice a year, and that somebody must convene them in the absence of a convener, it seemed most expedient to allow the bishop to make that appointment. And so that is what this amendment does. Paul.
So I'm just wondering about the language of canonically resident. Are lay people considered canonically resident? Because that sounds like only clergy language, and a neighborhood has two conveners, correct? Co-conveners, lay and clergy.
That is correct. Yeah. So in this instance, canonically resident would be understood to mean that an eligible lay person would be a member of a congregation located in that neighborhood. Okay, then I'll move on to the third canon amendment. I do not see the proposer here to speak to it, but I'm familiar with it, so I'll mention it, which is that this amendment removes some language that has been inoperable in our canons for at least a couple of decades. This is related to though at least it's not even clear that it met even once during Bishop Cate's term. I do know that it met some during Bishop Ted's term. And as near as I can tell from the convention journals, it essentially functioned as an opportunity for a group of people to get together at the cathedral for drinks and conversation with the bishop once a year. So this is simply removing language that has not been used for a very long time. It does, however, retain the obligation of the cathedral to submit a report to the convention each year, which also hasn't recently such a report to this convention if it's not there already. Sally, is your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm hearing a lot of warble in your voice.
How about now?
You're
Any
better now, then. Yeah, we heard some of that description that you just gave, but not the whole shebang. So
Okay,
still drinks with the bishop, but not kind of the fulsome description of what this would do.
okay, I'm sorry. I got the dreaded your internet connection is unstable warning, despite being extremely close to my router. Anyway, so what this resolution does is it simply removes inoperable language. It does retain the obligation of the cathedral to provide a report to the convention, which also hasn't been happening for the last couple of decades, but which the cathedral has resumed this year. So that report will be on the website shortly if it's not there already. C. Davies Reed to guide us through a discussion of the budget. And I'll post a link to that here in a sec.
Thanks, Brennan. Good morning, everybody. I've got a short, is there anybody who did not attend a neighborhood meeting? I don't see any hands going up. So you may have already seen this PowerPoint that I have. It's relatively short. Brendan, do you think it's worthwhile to go through that again, or shall we just cut to the question time? I hate to short sheet the operation.
I think it would be beneficial to run through the PowerPoint because it's quite short, and also this is being recorded for the benefit of delegates who can't be here, who may not have been able to.
All right. All right. Am I able to share my screen?
Should be.
Okay. Now, where'd it go? Hang on. I know I've got it here. I opened it. There we go. Now go to share. There. Now right there is what I want. There we go. Okay. Well, welcome to the 2023 budget. The budget is prepared to go to the convention. It's been approved by the Budget Formation Committee and passed to the Executive Council. And then with their approval at their last meeting, it's ready to go to convention. We always have to express gratitude for the folks who worked on the budget because it takes quite a bit of time out of their days, and we appreciate that very much. It includes Roseanne Grasstein, Laura Dreyer, Greg Staub, Christopher Beasley, Brendan O'Sullivan-Hale, our treasurer, Laurel Cornell, and yours truly. And always special thanks to Brendan because he does a lot of the heavy lifting, making sure all the formulas and numbers line up and that they actually are correct, which is always a helpful thing in this work. So we move on to the big news is the budget is balanced. We are required by canon to offer a balanced budget. So we've been able to do that. The increase this year in the budget is 115,000 and change. That's a 3.1% increase to a total of 3.869 million and change. Pretty good that we could keep the increase to only 3.1% when inflation, as everybody knows, is running between 8 and 9%. So it was pretty tricky, but we were able to do it and keep the budget in line. And I appreciate everybody's effort on that. We only started out about a couple of 100,000 out of balance when we started this thing, which is not even close to the worst scenario we've ever faced. So when we had to make tough decisions, they were less tough this year. Still tough, but you know, that's nothing on that topic. So let's go to the income side of things. The numbers in the parentheses are line numbers from the budget. This is just the real highlight reel that we've got here, and we'll make time for any questions that y'all might have. Line 3 is the apportionment line. This is the funding that comes directly from our congregations to the diocese. The Investment and Finance Committee and Budget Formation Committee, with approval of Executive Council, is recommending to keep the apportionment level at 13.5% yet again this year. So that's pretty good news. Our other large income line is line 11, and that's a draw from our invested funds, from the endowment, as it were. And it looks like we're going to be asking for a 5% draw against our invested funds. This is good news and bad news. The good news is we're asking for only 5%, where those of you who've been around for a while know that we have been higher than this. And we've really worked hard to get it down to a maximum of 5%. We need to stay focused on that because what we have is a perpetual endowment, and we want the corpus to be here for a long time to come. So drawing no more than 5% is a great rule of thumb. It really ought to be 4.5%, but this year we're going to do 5%. The other income line that is of note this year is line 14. This is the unused draw from a previous year. So this is money that we had pulled from the funds, and then we decided not to return it to the investment funds, but use it in interesting ways. Two of those ways include the other two line numbers, 126 and 92. 126 is youth ministry search, $63,000 and change. And I think you're going to get a report on what all that is being spent on with ministry architects and all that here in just a few minutes. But one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because the place it appears in the budget is in salaries. And that's because we're using it as a placeholder for the future youth ministry person. So that's why it's appearing under salaries and not under some other area where we would normally put a consultant fee. So that's what that is. Then line 92, Episcopal Service Corps. This is seed money for this first opening of the Episcopal Service Corps. It's running through Trinity, Indianapolis. And there are, is it 4 or 5? Somebody told me this the other day and I can't remember. 4, thanks, Kristen. There are 4 young people and who've come to be part of the Episcopal Service Corps. They're living together, intentional community, and then working in the community, the larger community. A couple of them are working at St. Richard's, others across a broader breadth of nonprofits. This is a really great investment for us, I think. I think other people in the Executive Council will agree, because this gives people an opportunity to really test out ministry and a potential call to ministry. And as it turns out, it's become a pretty good source for folks to discern a call to ordain ministry. So it seems like a really good use of these funds. That's on the income side. We move to the expense side. Line 61 is Waycross. You'll see that that number has gone up this year, and that is to provide for immediate capital needs, $30,000 larger than last year. We all know that Waycross is never going to be a moneymaker, and isn't intended to be, really. If we could get the program side to be cash even, that would be fabulous. But that doesn't help when it comes to replacing HVAC systems and fixing roofs and doing all that sort of stuff. So they have $30,000 in capital needs right now, and this is to help them address those issues. You combine lines 128, 33, and 34, and you'll get the total cost of healthcare. This is important not only because it's a huge benefit for our clergy. It is one of the great ways that we're able to attract talent. And I love to hear Ken and Kristen talk about it, because she gets all giddy when she talks about this wonderful premium that we offer. The healthcare increase this year is 5.5%, which is astonishing and small. That number comes to us at practically Labor Day, so it's always a last-minute plug in there. But it's also the largest single line item in the budget when you add all these together. It's a huge benefit and it's a huge expense, but I sure do appreciate it. To that end, the premium copay cost, the amount that the participants pay, we are returning to increasing that. As you will recall, prior to the pandemic, we had committed to raising the copay up to 25%. We were going to do that over 10 years at 1% a year. Pandemic hit, we put a freeze on that, and now we're, I think we all agree we're kind of coming out of this thing. So in 2023, we're going to return to the percent increase and take it to 23 and 23, and then the next 2 years with a max of 25%. So that's an FYI. Salary increases, line 123 and 125, 3% on those. Obviously not keeping up with inflation. We hope to be able to make up for some of that in the next couple of years. Line 71, anti-racism, is a smaller amount this year. It is not a reduction in funds for anti-racism work. It's responding to what they actually asked for. So this is, they said we need only this much, so we gave them only that much. So it is not a slashing of some line item. Line 78, general convention accrual. We have some money accrued in the general convention fund. As many of you, well, folks on this call probably know, that we had a very short general convention this year, which meant we got to save some money. And the next general convention's in Louisville, so we won't have to buy any plane tickets, and that'll be a savings. So Brendan, with his sharp pencil, said, I think maybe we can save up enough money by reducing that a little bit. Lines 89 and 90, Pathways program into curacy support. The Pathways program is sunsetting at this point, and so the support in that line item can go to zero. At the same time, the curacy program, which seems to be very successful, needs more support, so you'll see that going up to support that program. And I think it's a great program. I appreciate that we've got it. Well, particularly I appreciate it because St. Francis has one. So, thank you very much. Lines 104 and 144, these are 2 more line items that are inversely growing and descending. congregational grants increasing and congregational aid decreasing. The congregational aid was direct cash to parishes or congregations to run their operations. And that model is changing to a grant program. Whoever wants one of those has to go to the College for Congregational Development, and then they can submit grants to keep ministries going and keep their creativity alive. So those two line items are also linked. And that's the highlight reel. So questions here, let me stop sharing. Questions, comments, thoughts, provocations? Excellent. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, C. Davies. I am not seeing any hands. So apparently you've done a great job.
It's the team that did a great job, not just me.
All right, then. Well, then I will we'll move on to our last agenda item, which is to give you all an update on where we are with the renovation of our youth ministry and the search for a new youth minister. And for that, I'll call on Ken and Kristen.
Thank you, Brendan. I am going to try and I'm going to put the link in the chat for our ministry architects report. I'm having a little, there we go. Hopefully, let's see. Okay. All right. This is the report. You would have seen that hopefully in the newsletter of these last couple of weeks. It's also something you can find on our on the youth ministry page of the diocesan website, and also on the page for convention, diocesan convention for this year. Just in terms of context, in 2019, the person who'd been serving, Victoria Hoppus, who had been serving, yes, thank you, Sean. Victoria Hoppus had been serving as half-time diocesan youth minister and half-time camp director of Waycross. And she left her position on kind of that joint position on staff between Waycross and the bishop's staff to take another position. And that was at the I think her last day was December 31st of 2019. So we were in the beginnings of trying to figure out how to find a way forward with youth ministry and what we wanted that to look like. And then everything went into shutdown. So over the past 2.5 years, we've been trying to both figure out a new way forward and also keep diocesan youth ministry going. Thanks particularly to Holly Rankin-Zaire in Evansville, rector of St. Paul's in Evansville, who strove mightily to try and make sure that that was still happening. And thanks also to C. Davies Reed for just perpetually encouraging us, directing us back to the importance of youth ministry at the diocesan level. We tried several different configurations. We tried to call a shared position between the cathedral and the bishop's staff, a diocesan position that would be shared between both entities. Over the course of 7 months, we had 0 applicants. We had 1 applicant, but really it was somebody who was not equipped to serve in that role. So we were kind of bumping into trying to find a new way forward. And that led up to last March at clergy conference. Just prior to clergy conference, we were on a monthly call with the bishop. Clergy of the diocese were gathering on a monthly basis for a Zoom call with Bishop Jennifer. And one of our colleagues requested a chance to talk about this at clergy conference. So we actually had 12 people at clergy conference, 12 clergy from around the diocese, who had a conversation saying, this is really important and we need to do something, and kind of had some ideas, one of which was gathering youth leaders from around the diocese on a monthly basis to share ideas, get to know each other, collaborate. One of which was to have a fall retreat, and one of which was to have a high school youth mission trip in the summer of 2023. Out of that conversation came this, the decision that we made was to work with a group called Ministry Architects, and it's their report that you'll see in the chat, because this is what they do all the time, is to try and figure out what's necessary for and lots of different kinds of ministry, but they got started with youth ministry. So we started working with them in this late spring, early summer, and two of their consultants came to us in September 26th through 28th, for our listening sessions. And they met with people in person in Indianapolis, and then they met with people in person in Evansville, and then they met with people, and this was all ranges from teenagers all through, you know, all kinds of different folks from all over the diocese. They met also with folks virtually who were not able to make it to one of those listening sessions. And then from that, they compiled this report. One of the things that we heard initially from that conversation at Clergy Conference in March was that we'd had this halftime position. I mean, the portion of what had been Victoria's position that was diocesan youth ministry was halftime, and pretty loud and clear from the get-go in that first conversation in March with clergy. It was clear that people wanted to have a full-time position at the diocesan level as a member of the bishop's staff, and that was confirmed through all of these listening sessions that happened in September. So Ministry Architects has made some recommendations. First, that this be a bishop staff position, that is a full-time position, and that is more than producing a couple of events over the course of the year, but in fact, working to connect leaders around the diocese, working to connect young people around the diocese, so that we can see the ways that God is at work together, that we feel connected with one another, and the young people are experiencing that in their lives and in their lives of faith. What Mary Beth and Heather Patton-Graham, who are the two consultants who were here, have said, and both of them happen to be Episcopalians. Ministry Architects is not, it works across numerous denominations. But they've said nationally and across denominations that this is a time, this sort of whatever this is, post-pandemic time, is a restart for youth ministry everywhere. And so we're, you know, in fact, right on time, even though it's so difficult to have had to go through this period of kind of youth ministry at the diocesan level being pretty fallow over these last 2.5 years. This is a time for us to be restarting and developing a thing that may not look a whole lot like what we had before. So they've made recommendations over the next 18 months for a strategic plan that includes appointing 2 different teams. They identified some leaders from around the diocese who also were confirmed by, you know, who Bishop Jennifer agreed would, you know, are hoping that they would serve in these teams. Those 2 teams include what they're calling a renovation team. It's about 4 or 5 people from across the diocese who are gonna work together to help develop a sustainable diocesan youth ministry. It's an 18-month commitment that has some urgency at the beginning. So the first 3 months will be more intense. And then after that, that group will be working together on a monthly basis, monthly meetings with work in between over the course of the next 18 months. The other group that has been invited is the group that will be the search team. And that's 5 people from around the diocese, both lay and ordained leaders. And they have a commitment of 6 months and will be vetting the materials of people who send in their applications, handling the initial interviews, and then making recommendations to the bishop as we move to the finalist phases, but taking part in all aspects of preparation in the search. So in the report, you'll see that there are recommendations for both the now goals, as Ministry Architects has laid those out, and the future goals over the course of the 18 months that we'll be working together. Our consultants, Mary Beth Aplenap is our lead consultant, and she is an Episcopalian and has a background in youth ministry and in teaching. Their request, our lead consultant's request and recommendation, is that we bring this whole report and the recommendations to the Executive Council for approval and adoption, and that would be shared at diocesan convention. And it's actually going to be shared by a young member of our diocese. So I'm looking forward to that. But I appreciate especially those members of council who are here. Other members of council also took part in the listening sessions as well. So thanks for your time and your connection and your desire to help care for the lives of faith of our young people. I am happy to answer any questions, or if anybody has any thoughts you'd like to share, what would be helpful to you in trying to understand better or share what thoughts or feelings you have. Any questions about, yeah, Sally?
I just wanted to comment that I feel the report reflected what I heard in the one listening session I attended. And it was a pretty vigorous discussion. So kudos to them.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Anything else? All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Sean, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just real quickly, I noticed, Kristen, you mentioned the two teams, but a third team that recommended, which is something I think that we need to have on the agenda for convention, is inviting a prayer team.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was my mistake. I was specifically extending invitations for the other two teams this week. And then beyond that point, we'll also be working on the inviting members of the prayer team. So yes, thank you. 3 teams will be invited.
Yeah. I'm assuming this is not the place to bisect the report, but at some of the upcoming meetings, we'd be able to talk about some of the things that ministry architects hit upon, and I think a couple things I noticed that they missed. So I'm hoping that there'll be chances for some of us to provide input here shortly.
Well, you're welcome to now if you'd like to. Yeah, I'm certainly open to feedback and happy to respond to questions.
Okay. Well, I wasn't prepared to discuss it in any detail, but I know the one thing that I thought was a miss was they talked about, in terms of young adults, they talked about campus ministry. This has always been a weakness. We talk about campus ministry for young adults, but we never talk about young adults who don't attend college.
Actually, Sean, we do, and we have in a different context than this, and that was early in the pandemic, and I'm still trying to frame what time is and when this was, but sometime during the abyss of lockdown, we had a virtual discussion with a member of the presiding bishop's staff named Shannon Kelly, who we together convened a discussion of folks from across the diocese that was particularly focused both on campus ministry and on ministry with young adults who are not currently attending college. That's something we're working to attend to. And I would say the next piece of that, which is not inside this particular conversation, is seeking to gather together with both campus ministers and folks who are interested in doing ministry with people, especially in their 20s, I would say, who are not presently in college. And I have zero bandwidth until after diocesan convention, but that's on my radar to be engaging on the other side of convention. So it's on our radar. It's not in this particular report, but it is something that we're aware of.
Okay, that was just the one gap I saw in the report. Otherwise, the report is excellent. I found it easier to print it out and read it that way, but it's very thorough and very encouraging.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually, just so you all know, we will have one copy of that report on every table at convention as well. So just know if it's easier, that will be there as a resource to you. Sally, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that young adult ministry was a hot button for me too, Sean. And I talked at my meeting the meeting I attended about what's the definition of what we're discussing within this scope. And I think there was the ministry architects folks were differentiating between youth and young adult. Somebody did say, hey, that's something else the campus ministry can do. And I thought, outside the scope of this discussion. but it's not just you and I. I've got a young adult who is not a college student as well. So it's definitely a need.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. It's clear that being specific about what we're doing in each of these is really important, and it's not lost. It's just that broadening beyond the scope of what we're talking about here is we're just trying to be very specific in this particular report. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Back to you, Brendan.
Thank you. It was our hope that we might have a quorum of executive council members to formally adopt this report today, but we do not have a quorum on this call, so we'll have to do that vote electronically after the fact. But that concludes the business of the convention hearing. Is there anything else that needs to come before this gathering? It looks like the answer is no. So we will see you all at convention on either Thursday or on either Friday or Saturday or both. Really looking forward to that. Meantime, go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
To God.
Thanks be to God. Thank you all for being here.
Take care, everybody.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Bye-bye. See you Friday.